ये यूनिट मसनूई जहानत से तैयार किया गया है, इसलिए इसमें अल्फाज की दुरुस्तगी और अदायगी में गलती का एहतमाल हो सकता है। ऐसी सूरत में असल यूनिट से रुजू करें। मौलाना आज़ाद नेशनल उर्दू यूनिवर्सिटी के सेंटर फॉर डिस्टेंस एंड ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन के तालीमी प्रोग्राम में आपका खैर मकदम है। ये ऑडियो यूनिवर्सिटी के कॉपीराइट शुदा खुद इक्तिसाबी मवाद से तैयार किया गया है।
ये मवाद मौलाना आज़ाद नेशनल उर्दू यूनिवर्सिटी के एआई की मदद से तैयार करदा ऑडियो सीरीज का हिस्सा है।
Welcome back to another deep dive. We are jumping straight in today, and the mission for this one is, well, it's highly practical.
Extremely practical.
Yeah, we are looking at a huge stack of research and source materials that essentially serve as the ultimate survival guides for modern professional communication.
Right, covering the entire spectrum of how we interact at work.
Exactly. We are bridging this massive gap between the incredibly rigid traditional world of formal business letters.
It was a whole thing on its own.
Oh, absolutely. But bridging that all the way over to the absolute wild west of social media and these massive online meeting platforms.
It is a really wide spectrum to cover today. I mean, we are looking at guidelines that dictate exactly where to place your margins on a physical piece of paper.
Down to the inch.
Yeah, and that's sitting right next to warnings about the security risks of hosting 300 people in a virtual room.
Right.
But what connects these, and what's fascinating here, is that whether you are drafting a complaint about a piece of office furniture or managing a sprawling virtual conference, the underlying objective is identical.
Which is what?
You have to convey information clearly, you have to establish a reliable, undeniable record, and this is the hard part. You have to connect with other humans without causing friction or confusion.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think most of us operate under the assumption that we just naturally know how to communicate at work.
We assume it's intuitive.
Right, like you fire off an email, you hop on a video call, it feels completely natural. But the rules outlined in our research really highlight that the landscape is constantly shifting.
And the stakes for getting it wrong are incredibly high.
They really are. So, for you listening right now, whether you are preparing to negotiate the stipend for an upcoming internship, or you're just trying to figure out why a full day of virtual meetings leaves you feeling completely drained, this deep dive is going to give you the exact toolkit you need.
It really will.
So let's start with what feels like the most traditional end of the spectrum, the foundational power of the business letter.
Right, which might sound like a relic of the past to some people.
Totally.
But what we have to remember about business correspondence is that it acts as a formal legal document.
It's not just a polite note.
No, not at all. It is not just an exchange of pleasantries. A formal business letter can literally be used in a court of law as evidence to settle a dispute.
That's a huge point.
It's binding.
Yeah.
When you put something in that specific format, you are creating a permanent legal footprint. That is why the language, the tone, and even the visual layout are so strictly governed by these established rules.
Let me push back on that for just a second there.
Sure.
Because in an era where every email we send is automatically stamped with the date, the time, the sender's IP address.
Right, all the metadata.
Exactly, and it's archived on a cloud server somewhere. Does strict physical formatting like left justified block text really matter anymore?
I get why you'd ask that.
It just feels like we are clinging to an aesthetic for no real reason.
It is a fair question, but it goes far beyond aesthetics. It's actually about cognitive load and standardization.
Okay, how so?
Well, the block format where every single line starts flush at the left margin, it's single-spaced within paragraphs, double-spaced between them.
Right, very rigid.
It's the global gold standard because it eliminates visual friction. Think about it. When an executive or a legal team is reviewing hundreds of documents, they shouldn't have to hunt for the sender's address or decipher some unique, creative layout.
Oh, I see.
When every letter looks exactly the same structurally, the reader's brain can focus entirely on the content. It completely strips away the formatting noise.
That makes total sense. So it's essentially an efficiency tool that's just masquerading as a formatting rule.
Exactly.
Speaking of efficiency, there is a highly specific warning in our sources about a trap you can easily fall into when you're trying to be brief, specifically regarding dates.
Oh, the date trap, yes.
Let's say you are drafting an international contract, and you write the delivery date using just numbers, like 6-3-2022.
This is a perfect example of how a tiny, seemingly innocent formatting choice can cause massive global business fallout.
Right. Because if an American reader sees 6-3-2022, they're going to read that as June 3rd.
Without a doubt.
But a European partner looking at that exact same document might have meant March 6th.
Yep.
Imagine the mild panic, or honestly, the massive financial liability of realizing a shipping container of goods is expected to arrive in March when you plan for June.
It's a disaster waiting to happen.
So the sources insist that to avoid this trap entirely, you must spell out the month. You write March 6, 2022.
Because precision is everything. When a multi-million-dollar contract relies on a delivery date, ambiguity is your absolute worst enemy.
Yeah.
And that demand for precision extends directly to how we address people, too. The guidelines are very clear on titles and salutations, especially when you are initiating contact with a stranger.
The sources note that Mrs. Scripps has become the absolute default title for women.
Right.
Regardless of whether they are married or unmarried, it is just the established professional standard now.
It is.
But what I found really interesting is the protocol for when you don't know the gender of the recipient at all.
In those cases, you simply use their job title or their full name without any prefix whatsoever.
The examples provided are highly specific. You would address someone as Chief Manager Shahnaz Hassan.
Yes.
Or Director Gurpreet Singh. Or, if it's appropriate for the company culture, simply Dear Gurpreet. It's a really clean way to maintain professional respect without making assumptions.
Exactly. It strips away the potential for awkwardness or offense. By focusing on the role or the individual's given name, you allow the actual business at hand to take center stage.
Instead of stumbling over archaic etiquette rules.
Precisely.
Now, I want to transition into the section covering miscellaneous letters, because this is where these rigid rules hit the very messy real world.
The day-to-day operations.
Yes. What caught my attention here was the sheer level of petty but legally necessary detail in the examples provided. These aren't abstract concepts. They're grounded in heavy, mundane, day-to-day operations.
They are highly operational. Let's look at the mechanics of those examples.
Well, there is an offer letter detailing a 6-month internship at Hitachi Consulting, and it explicitly lists the stipends as INR 20,000 per month.
Right, getting the terms on paper.
Then there is a firm sending a request for information to purchase 3 printers. But they don't just ask for printers.
No, they don't.
They ask for 3 HP LaserJet Pro 200 color M251N Unix.
And that level of detail is exactly what we were talking about with the date formatting. In a request for information or a purchase order, you cannot afford to just ask for some printers.
Right, because who knows what you'll get.
Exactly. You specify the exact make and model, so there is absolutely no room for the supplier to claim a misunderstanding if they deliver the wrong equipment.
The most relatable examples, though, are definitely the complaint letters.
Oh, absolutely.
There is this one scenario where a guest house manager is writing to Surya Furnitures because they delivered a dark brown sofa instead of a tan one.
Happens all the time.
And the manager also notes that the bed they delivered varies in size and isn't exactly 72 inches by 72 inches. They even issue an ultimatum.
Right, replace it within a week, or the complete order is canceled.
Yes.
It's so intense.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to recognize that these aren't just complaints in the way we think of, say, a bad Yelp review.
No, they're much more formal.
These letters are pre-litigation tools.
Pre-litigation tools, I like that. The guest house manager isn't just venting about a color mismatch. They are establishing a paper trail.
Right.
Because if a bed isn't exactly 72 by 72 inches, it might not fit into the custom alcoves of the hotel rooms. It represents a tangible financial liability for the business.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense.
By putting the specific measurements, the error, and the ultimatum in a formal, standardized letter, they are protecting the company's bottom line and establishing grounds for a breach of contract.
There are other examples, too. Like a letter disputing a mysterious INR 3487 credit card charge.
Very common.
And another one to a local official complaining about pothole-ridden roads in SMS Colony that are delaying office commuters.
Right.
But seeing them framed as pre-litigation tools completely changes how you read them. It really highlights the power of brevity.
That is the common DNA across all these scenarios. Whether you are ordering 100 reams of A4 paper for a diagnostic center or demanding a road be recarpeted, the communication is brief, polite, and ruthlessly concise.
Ruthlessly concise is a great way to put it.
You state the problem, You provide the undeniable metrics, the exact rupee amount, the exact inches of the bed, and you state the desired resolution.
Which perfectly explains the acknowledgement letter section.
Yes.
Because you might assume that acknowledging the receipt of a dense, legally binding document would require a long formal response. But the sources suggest a one-line email is the standard.
It's all you need.
The example provided is simply, I acknowledge the receipt of the documents. Thank you.
That single line is all that is required to complete the communication loop and shift the legal burden of knowledge.
I noticed a visual detail in one of the source examples that really hammered this home for me. It was a sample letter sign-off, and the entire signature block just read, in parentheses, Director.
Just the title.
No name, no inspirational quote, no extra fluff. Just Director. It proves that in business, less really is more.
The goal is maximum efficiency and establishing that permanent record. Once that is achieved, the communication has served its purpose.
Right.
But as we know, the medium we use to establish those records and conduct those communications has undergone a massive structural transformation.
That brings us to the digital shift. We are moving from paper margins to pixels and massive digital networks. Our sources note that while virtual tools certainly existed and were growing, the COVID-19 pandemic acted as an unprecedented catalyst.
It forced a societal shift from physical to online almost overnight.
It really did. And it wasn't just an adoption of new software.
No, it was a fundamental rewiring of how global business operates.
And the scale is just staggering. The research notes there are now over 4.5 billion people using social media globally.
4.5 billion. It's hard to even conceptualize.
It is. It has evolved so far beyond sharing personal updates. It encompasses social gaming, massive e-commerce infrastructures, and even political movements.
It really touches everything.
The sources specifically mention platforms like Twitter being utilized for U.S. political campaigns to persuade voters. And just to be clear, for you listening, we're just analyzing the communication tactics outlined in our sources here.
Right. We are not taking any political stances on those campaigns.
Exactly. We are looking strictly at the mechanics of scale.
And that scale is exactly why the market for digital communication tools fractured the way it did. Different platforms evolved to solve very different strategic needs.
Right. And choosing the wrong one for a specific type of meeting can be disastrous.
Let's look at how the sources group these tools, because it is definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation.
For instance, Skype is positioned essentially as a legacy tool. It paved the way, but it is noted for suffering from early audio and video connection issues. It is basically the grandfather of the space.
Contrast that with Facebook Live, which the sources highlight as the king of sheer broadcasting.
GoToMeeting serves a similar function for up to 100 members, though the sources point out it relies on a limited 14-day free trial structure.
And then there is Zoom.
Zoom. It's ubiquitous, arguably the easiest to use, but the research explicitly warns about security vulnerabilities.
It specifically mentions incidents of Zoom hacking.
Yes, making it a highly risky platform choice for meetings discussing sensitive intellectual property or highly confidential policy. You have to match the tool's security profile to the meeting's content.
Choosing the right platform is only the first step, though. The larger issue our sources tackle is the psychological and operational impact of this shift.
Right.
We have traded physical presence for digital convenience, and that trade comes with severe consequences.
The pros are obvious, right?
Yeah.
We have zero travel costs, no more paying for boarding and lodging, and we can launch a global crisis meeting in 3 minutes.
Right. The efficiency is undeniable.
But the degradation of human contact is the massive downside the sources focus on.
The research argues that while the workforce is becoming incredibly proficient technically, we are becoming socially deficient.
Socially deficient, wow.
When you remove face-to-face interaction, interpersonal skills atrophy. We lose the micro-expressions, the body language, and the natural flow of human socialization that builds trust.
And because we aren't in the same physical room, the temptation to divide our attention is just overwhelming. Which brings us to, here's where it gets really interesting. The multitasking trap.
Oh, yes.
The guidelines for organizers emphatically state that you must actively prevent participants from multitasking during virtual sessions.
It is the single biggest barrier to a successful virtual meeting. Multitasking is largely an illusion of productivity.
It really is.
If your team is checking emails or browsing social media while on a strategic call, they aren't actually absorbing the information. The ultimate objective of the meeting is entirely compromised.
So how do we actually survive this? How do we keep people engaged when they are staring at a grid of tiny boxes on a screen?
The sources provide a highly tactical survival guide for virtual environments.
First, they insist that desktop sharing is non-negotiable.
It is mandatory. Seeing faces is fine for a quick check-in, but for actual policy, strategy, or business meetings, auditory processing just isn't enough.
You need visual anchors.
You need to anchor the audience's attention with clear visual data. If they aren't looking at the same document you are discussing, you have already lost them.
Second, the platform must have a fully functional instant messaging feature running parallel to the video.
The chat box serves a vital psychological function. It allows for on-the-spot queries and real-time feedback without the friction of unmuting and interrupting the speaker.
Right. Nobody likes being interrupted.
It keeps the momentum of the meeting going while still making participants feel heard.
And finally, the ultimate defense against the multitasking trap: strict duration and an airtight agenda.
Discipline is the only way to maintain respect for your audience's time. The agenda must be communicated clearly beforehand, and the timeline must be enforced.
Because the moment a virtual meeting begins to drift or drag on beyond its stated purpose,
The audience will mentally check out and retreat to their inboxes every time.
it really all comes down to cognitive load again, doesn't it? Whether it is the left justified margins of a paper letter or a tightly controlled agenda on a Microsoft Teams call, the goal is to remove friction.
That's the common thread.
So, synthesizing all of this for you, listening, what is the real takeaway? The tools of our trade are going to keep evolving, but the core principles of professional communication are remarkably static.
They don't change.
Whether you are drafting a legally airtight pre-litigation complaint about a 72-inch bed, or you are strategizing how to keep 300 people focused on a virtual presentation without suffering a security breach, your mandate is clarity.
Yes.
It is discipline. And it is a deep structural respect for your audience's time and attention.
Those principles are the foundation. If you master them, the medium itself becomes secondary. But analyzing this massive shift from deliberate physical records to instant digital communication raises a fascinating question to leave you with.
I'm ready?
If brevity, standardized formatting, and the removal of emotional friction are the ultimate goals of professional communication, how long will it be before human beings are entirely removed from the equation?
Oh, wow.
Are we rapidly approaching a future where AI systems draft all of our legally binding complaints, read our standardized emails, and attend our virtual meetings as digital avatars, leaving us completely out of the daily communication loop? If efficiency is the ultimate metric, is the human element simply the final inefficiency waiting to be optimized out?
That is an incredibly provocative thought to leave on. A huge thank you to you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you take these tools, the psychology behind these formatting rules, and these virtual survival guidelines right into your next major negotiation or your next digital conference. Keep learning, keep pushing for clarity, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.